Yeah, definitely.
All right.
I see many familiar faces. Wonderful. Also, new roadmap, new people. That's also fantastic to see.
Yeah, the crowd is growing.
All right, Tomasz, will you kick this off?
Yeah, sure. Why not? I mean, thanks everyone first of all to take the time to hang out with us for a little bit. It's gonna be a very interesting spaces today. I've lost track of verses in the row, but today we will be focusing on the roadmap. So I think most of you have had a chance to check it out over the weekend. Today what we're going to do is just take a deeper dive into what's ahead, maybe give some context to some of the things that have appeared in the roadmap for better clarity, but also to describe what's the impact that we can kind of look forward to in terms of the technology being deployed. And the new features being enabled and the new targets that are set. So all of these things is what we'd be focusing on today. And since kind of like we've named the phases of the roadmap after the big minds and the movers and the shakers of the internet history, Turing, Metcalfe, and Berners-Lee, or even computer history, to be honest. It's also how we'll be structuring the conversation. I don't know, Brani Mirjiga, do you want to speak to the phases a little bit before we go into it?
Sure. Yeah, it's maybe just a quick intro. Hi, everybody. Yeah, we wanted to as the names of the phases give, really a big shout out to all of the three greats from this computer science world. And really, just for those of you who haven't been following, just a brief sentence on all of them. Turing was one of the first ones who actually introduced the computer science to this world in general. Also, father of artificial intelligence, by the way, and he's considered one of the biggest minds so far. On the other hand, Bob Metcalfe, who has then been the father of the first computer network, is actually his name is on the next phase, the phase that is following after Turing. Also one of our advisors and really famous for Metcalfe's law, really awesome guy. And the Metcalfe's law describes something called network effects. If you've heard of them before, you probably heard of them in the context of, for example, social media, how Facebook has been growing using these network effects, but also just generally any network, even from old school telephone networks to the internet. And he's considered the father of Ethernet, if you heard of Ethernet before. Not Ethereum, Ethernet, way before. And then Berners-Lee is the father of, Tim Berners-Lee is the father of World Wide Web. So every time you type in that www in front of a website, that's because of that guy. He invented that term. He actually created the first websites and the first links. And we'll be talking a little bit about that today as well. What linking really means and how it's important in the context of Web3. Well, anyway, he is not just the father of the World Wide Web, which is Web 1, let's say, and the Web 2 that we're living today, but he also coined the term semantic web, which is really what Web 3 is also heavily about, and it's really about meaning and really getting this web of data rather than just web of websites. So these three giants are really people who inspired us all a lot and who are more than worthy to be on the not just mentioned, but really integrated into this new roadmap of OriginTrail, which we're really excited to talk about more today. But before we go into all of these phases together, we actually wanted to reflect a little bit about what, on a high level, what type of metrics the roadmap follows. If you've noticed, on top of each of the phases, if you looked on the website, there's actually two key metrics that have been posted there as kind of the key thing to monitor while the project and the decentralized knowledge graph grows in general. And I don't know, maybe Tomasz, you want to jump in and explain what those metrics are, and then we dive deeper?
Yeah, of course. I mean, there's obviously the one metric which those of you who have been hanging out around the OriginTrail ecosystem are more familiar with, which is the total graph size. And then the total graph size is basically a metric that is important because it looks as the entire decentralized knowledge graph, and it counts how much, well, in brackets, like how much knowledge that consists in the knowledge graph. And what it actually does is counts all the data objects and all the connections between different data points between them. So let's say, we have one data point would be Brana and the other one would be Tomasz, and then the connection between us would say that we're co-founders of OriginTrail. That would mean that the total TGS of that particular data would be 3, because you'd have 2 data points and 1 connection between it. So that data, the total graph size, is really something that is like a very hardcore metric in terms of what's the total size of the knowledge that consists within the decentralized knowledge graph. And as such, it's been around for, especially this year, we were looking at it very closely, and we were really excited also to see the growth that was achieved in this year alone. I think we over 10x the total graph size from I think before. So the mainnet started in 2018, and in 2 years, in terms of TGS, we amassed around 8 million TGS, and then now only this year we've 10x that metric. So that was pretty exciting for within this year, and we're looking kind of, you've seen the kind of the targets in the kind of forthcoming period is something that we see TGS really, as the DKG grows, also that number to grow significantly. The other thing which is quite exciting as well, though, is that next to the TGS, right now we're going to be able to introduce another very important metric, which is going to be assets. We'll look kind of more closely into how really an asset is structured within the decentralized knowledge graph. But basically, the definition of an asset is really wide. So we really approach it from the perspective that this can be either a physical asset, it could be a digital asset, it could be an NFT, it could also be a claim and certificate, a standard. It could be a lot of different things that are described in this same way. So it can be, literally spanning from things like in supply chain objects to a very general web resources. But all these things have in common is that they are living in the decentralized knowledge graph, and because they are there, they are made discoverable, they are made verifiable, and they are made valuable. So like as this will grow, I think it also offers a much more tangible, in a way, option for a metric, because it's a little bit more easy to understand, and also it's a very core and important metric to the DKG, as much so as the total graph size. So we'll see that they'll definitely move in a correlation as well. But it's something that we kind of look forward to growing and see how it kind of increases as the phases flow.
Yeah, maybe just before we hop off into the deeper dive, when we look at these metrics, so the TGS kind of measures really the volume of how much data there is in the graph, while the assets are a higher order metric. So you could essentially be growing. For example, you can have some data on an asset one day, and then a few days later, there's going to be more data on it because potentially this asset could be an NFT you're playing with a game with, and then the results of that game get all of that data grows around that asset knowledge graph, but essentially you still have that so the data around the asset might grow, but that doesn't mean that it's kind of a different thing. So it's actually like an entity in a knowledge graph. So for example, for those of you who do not know about knowledge graphs, just a brief sentence: knowledge graphs are being used by pretty much every big name in Web 2. Everybody from Netflix, Google, Facebook, Amazon, Uber, NASA, everybody uses them, and for a good reason, because they're really one of the best ways to capture information, integrate it, and then make it valuable and sort of discern, get knowledge out of it. And for example, whenever you do a Google search, you're really querying the Google Knowledge Graph. Or if you're getting a recommendation from Amazon on what to buy, that's coming from the Amazon Knowledge Graph. And why it can do these things is because it's not about strings, it's rather about things. That's how Google actually coined the explanation back in the day when they coined the name of Knowledge Graph. So in that sense, it's about entities and then relations between them and then data about these entities. And the difference here being that in the decentralized Knowledge Graph, we look at all of these entities in a bit of a wider context than what traditional knowledge graphs look at them. And we really look at them in the context of Web3. So that means being able to provide all of this, which we're used to in the blockchain Web3 space, making everything really verifiable, being able to not just by default trust, but actually verify, have value attached to it at the protocol level, such as value, for example, in the DeFi industry, and then also then adding discoverability on top of it, which is one of the core features of the of knowledge graphs in general, but especially the decentralized knowledge graph, because it bridges multiple different sources and in a permissionless way. So in that sense, assets and TGS are intertwined. But the difference there being is that assets speak, like Tomasz said, of a more of a tangible, more human or humanly understandable, let's say, metric, rather than just a kind of a volume of how big or how interconnected the graph is, which total graph size really is there to measure. Yeah, hope that gives a little bit more context. Tomasz, back to you.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, no, I think it was a very it's a very cool thing to have assets like that, right? And you can really, we were also, and we'll touch that on the Turing phase, but like if you do think about the NFT, the thing that we with the supercharger, which we'll again touch upon in the Turing phase, is something that you do is you kind of protect, connect, and evolve NFTs, and that evolve part for it as well is just so crucial, because that's where really the knowledge graphs start to grow around a particular asset. And yeah, like that, it's a very exciting concept that will yield just a lot of value, and those network effects that we're kind of all eyeing, it's there. That's really around the assets. Yeah, and I think on the topic of assets, Brana, if you want, if we're kind of moving towards the deep dive on the different phases. So starting with the Turing phase, obviously assets are high up on the agenda with the V6, and could you speak to just the how really kind of like how we're introducing the unique asset locators, and what are they and how do they function?
Sure. Yeah. So one of the key things about, well, having the ability to encapsulate an asset and then attach a knowledge graph to it is actually the ability to find it. And discoverability has two parts to it. One is you're able to discover something by some sort of search term, like, for example, in Google, when you go search for I don't know, buying like a boat. You might not know exactly which boat you want or on which website to look for, but you go and, type in, I don't know, wooden boat or something like that, and you get a list of websites, and then you kind of end up finding what you're looking for, that particular thing. Or you might actually know a link where you can already find it. And on Web 2 or web generally, the web today, links point to websites, and then these websites somehow refer to some objects, right? But in the Web3, we actually want to create a more direct connection, and this direct connection is really having this link be actually a link to the asset itself. So kind of like a profile of that physical or digital thing. So you can see a little bit of how that looks like with, for example, things like NFTs. You're able to find it on a blockchain, for example. You can locate it via its blockchain address and token ID, or like a smart contract in general. But the idea here is that there is no universal asset locator in that sense created so that you can refer to pretty much anything in the world today. And that's where the decentralized knowledge graph really is going to shine in this Turing phase, because we're introducing universal asset locators, kind of like an evolution of the URL or universal resource locators. So I'm sure everybody's familiar what URLs are, but essentially what that part of the resource means is that it actually helps you locate some web resource, like a web page, or like for example, a document somewhere online. And the URL always has some sort of structure, which looks like, I don't know, www.origintrail.io/roadmap, for example. That will take you to the roadmap website, which is a resource. And in this case, if you look at like the offline world, for example, physical world, if you look at supply chains, you've all seen things like barcodes, but these barcodes are really just identifiers, so they don't actually help you locate something. They help you identify something. That could be a unit, object, or some batch. But the point there being is that the universal asset locator is going to be the Web3 version of the URL. So having the ability to actually attach a link, and that being a verifiable link, to any single possible asset, physical or digital, in the world. So for example, that could be, like I said, an NFT. You can have a link that is a universal asset locator for that NFT that's going to definitely not only direct you to that specific NFT, it's also going to load the whole asset data that's part of the NFT knowledge graph. Also, for example, we could look at, like, for example, pharmaceutical, let's say, object that becomes an asset when you're introducing it into the knowledge graph, and then being able to have a universal asset locator. And with this, you're able to essentially not just query everything about that particular asset, for example, pharmaceutical, you're able to attach more things to it, and then you're able to find it and search for it. So think of it as the ideal tool for mapping any object, be it physical or digital, with the ability to actually then interact with it. And it really solves this discoverability problem from the base layer. Then on top of that, adding to assets is an additional thing called keywords that's also coming in version 6 OriginTrail, which is really the Turing release, which is how you can attach keywords to a specific asset. And that is pretty much like how you can attach a keyword to a website, like on Google. So when you go and search for whatever, you go search for OriginTrail in Google, this word is actually a keyword, and Google is going to look for it on all the websites that it has indexed in its knowledge graph, and it's going to give you what it thinks is the most relatable set of links actually to that keyword. Well, in the decentralized knowledge graph, there's the concept is very similar. You just don't get links or URLs to websites. You will actually get universal asset locators, or Web3 links, if I may, that will actually direct you to specific assets that are associated with that keyword. And all kinds of interesting things come out there because of now these two new primitives are all built in a decentralized way that gives us actually a lot of power, which previously wasn't possible with Google. Now this whole process of optimizing all of the searches and making sure that everybody gets the right information is not in the power of one organization, rather in the power of the community. And given that there's actually going to be tools how you can actually participate in this. So not only just create assets and link them and index them into the decentralized knowledge graph in the similar way that Google does it, you're also able to then participate in the curation of these search results and really any queries that are performed on the decentralized knowledge graph. Essentially having this knowledge graph become kind of a knowledge graph of knowledge graphs. So meaning that it's able to index any information, anything from any existing knowledge graph with version 6 and support for new technologies that are being introduced, such as RDF and Sparkle. These are these interoperable technologies that are really the core of the semantic web movement. And with these technologies, we actually get the ability to index and integrate with existing knowledge graphs as well. So all of that actually being able to then create assets out of, and these assets in the Web3 be discoverable and verifiable, of course, through the decentralized knowledge graph, either by universal asset locators or by actually finding these Web3 keywords and using them to discover any of these assets. So that's all coming in the Turing phase, and that is all going to be enabled by actually a succession of releases within the V6 label. So OriginTrail is currently in version 5, is actually going into version 6, and there's going to be several stages during that process. So they're going to introduce different new elements into the decentralized knowledge graph. But first of those definitely will be the ability to create universal asset links, locators, and then actually provision assets in the knowledge graph so that you can actually grow the knowledge graph around them. And for example, one of the first ones that you will be able to see is for NFTs. So I'm actually very excited to announce that within the coming weeks, the first beta version of OriginTrail version 6 is going to be out, and that is going to particularly be interesting for anybody building anything within the NFT space, because you will be able to actually start supercharging your NFTs very much like the supercharger interface has. We've shown. If you haven't seen, head over to supercharger.origintrail.io and for the first glimpse into what this will be able to do. But essentially, with beta, this will actually open up a new test network of OriginTrail version 6, and it will provide a dedicated SDK for NFT builders that actually can provision their own assets, universal asset locators, and index them into the graph for discoverability and then for further extendability. So this is going to be very exciting, and it's coming within the next couple of weeks. So if you're interested in that, actually jump over to supercharger.origintrail.io and join the waitlist. There's a button in the upper right corner. If you're interested, we will be happy to get you on board as soon as the version 6 beta is out. So, all right, that was a quick intro into what's going to happen in the Turing phase, and really the biggest news around the new tools coming in the decentralized knowledge graph. Now, there's a lot of new updates in version 6. Some of these updates are related to really how the protocol functions. We've introduced quite a lot of optimizations, so there's going to be a lot of scaling improvements, performance improvements, but I wouldn't focus on that too much so we don't spend half of the time today on the spaces on all of these improvements. There will be certainly much more information released when the beta is out, but it's going to be very excited, and apart from being able to build on top of it, all of the people interested in running the nodes of OriginTrail decentralized knowledge graph version 6 will also be able to test out the new engine basically with the first beta release. So stay tuned around that. There's going to be quite a few exciting new developments. All right, so that's very briefly about the Turing phase. Essentially, this phase that we're right now currently in then follows into the next phase, which we've dubbed the Metcalfe phase. And so far, we haven't spoken much about it. So actually, would be cool to jump into that right now. Giga, what do you think? Do you want to jump into Metcalfe?
I'll leave you with the Metcalfe, but I would just like to kind of go back, not too far away into the past, or also dig into the present of why OriginTrail is positioned way better to tackle the world of assets, which is not only limited to digital assets, but what OriginTrail ecosystem is particularly interested in are the real world assets. And the main reason for this lies in the legacy that we have in delivering solutions together with our partners for supply chains. And currently we have solutions which are being used by the world's biggest organizations. Essentially, OriginTrail is being used for biggest retailers in the United States to exchange auditing reports on some 40% of the overall imports to the United States, which is pretty amazing. And it doesn't stop there. OriginTrail is being used in pharmaceuticals, for food. We see partners right now delivering solutions which are going to be, I guess, released very soon. I've seen a couple of videos, looks very exciting. And all of these solutions essentially cover the world of real world assets, and we're talking billions of different assets. And if we just look into the state of the art when it comes to the different NFT solutions, you can see that most of the solutions are focusing on art, digital art mostly, whereas not many solutions, or I would even say that less than a handful, are focusing on real world assets. And OriginTrail within this bucket is even better positioned. We believe that working with one of the best builders also in the Web3 space, like Akala, we see that this is the most, I would say, comprehensive way to actually achieve network effects, hence also the name Metcalfe. Branimir, you can also go deeper into the technicalities of the Metcalfe, but the core emphasis here should be that OriginTrail is not here to kind of capture it all by itself, but essentially build a tool set that other developers, other partners are going to exploit in order to achieve network effects. And we have already seen some of the network effects being achieved through the multi-chain approach. Immense efficiencies were already achieved. Therefore, the total graph size has grown in the past a little bit more than 6 months, from 8 million to I think right now approaching 90 million TGS, which is pretty amazing. All of this was achieved by using other technologies and not reinventing the wheel. Important to note here again is that OriginTrail focusing on real world asset is opening an immense potential that has so far not been tapped into. The real world asset becoming part of the metaverse is something that will transform the way we interact with our own assets. So the ownership is highly important here. The way we prove that we are the actual owners of either digital or physical assets. And of course, the way we achieve additional benefits. So at the end of the day, it's not only about the network effects that OriginTrail ecosystem is achieving, but it's really about the network effects that every user that is in one way or the other way interacting with OriginTrail is achieving, and the way the network value is being accrued for every particular user. So not in a centralized way, but in a decentralized way. And again, very important emphasis here on the real world assets. And OriginTrail uniquely positioned in supply chains with the world-class partnerships, has all the expertise. As core builders, we have been involved in dozens of international projects, and the pipeline is growing without the rest. So we look forward to essentially in this Metcalfe phase, which is in a way already happening, but as Branimir pointed out, there are a few exciting things that are going to happen very soon, such as V6, that are going to really unlock the next stage where the network effect are going to be even more apparent. Also traveling to Miami in a couple of days, joining Tomasz there and the rest of the crew, organizing a meetup along with the likes of Akala and also Arrington XRP Capital. So that's going to be pretty much amazing. and also the following week going to the Coin Agenda conference in Puerto Rico. Actually, OriginTrail there is also sponsoring the NFT track, and it's going to be very interesting to see what are the what's going to be the feedback from the people there about what OriginTrail has achieved. And we're building upon the legacy, which is right now almost a decade long. So we have a very, very good starting position. Back to you, Branimir.
Yeah, you just said a lot there. So I'll try to just bring back a little bit of the Metcalfe roadmap phase in there. So one of the things that or Turing really is that you just mentioned around NFTs is that we've been working quite a bit into how to, in the easiest possible way, introduce the decentralized knowledge graph to the builders in the NFT space, because the actual tool set at least at the, let's say, the lower protocol level is pretty much ready there. So we're currently working on creating a very user-friendly, developer-friendly set of SDKs that will be usable by anybody building in the NFT space. And that's also part of the Turing phase. Part of that was also what we've actually had discussions back earlier this month in New York at the NFT NYC conference, where we've actually showcased this supercharging for the first time. And it was very interesting to see that the excitement really of the development community of having the ability to have a shared graph around a certain NFT, meaning a verifiable data set of information for just building out anything around NFTs, marketplaces, games. So not having to recreate actually backends for every single one of these use cases, and then having discoverability and verifiability built in. So it was really, really interesting to see that how well the community has responded at the event. And I'm not going to be with you guys in Miami, but I'm really looking forward to hearing the feedback from what you get over there, because I've been very, very positively actually surprised in New York. Sometimes when you work with these technologies every day, you don't realize even how exciting they might even be. But then going into Metcalfe phase, actually building on top of this and the network effects, as you mentioned on the NFTs, what we're actually going to come about and what you can see in the roadmap on the website is something of really a metaverse search engine. So the ability to leverage the decentralized knowledge graph to actually have an interoperable, decentralized cross-metaverse search engine. And in a way, people have called this also our partners from Akala, they dubbed it the Google for Web3. So the ability to actually, as I said, leverage these universal asset locators and keywords much in the same way as in Google, and then having just a root service that is enabling this for the whole Web3 across any single chain. As long as assets are indexed in the decentralized knowledge graph, they will be able to be discoverable and then also verifiable, of course, on top of that. So that's going to be very exciting once we actually build on this foundation of the Turing phase and introduce this notion in the Metcalfe phase. And then also, as you mentioned, the expansion really into DeFi, which is one of the other very important fields that the decentralized knowledge graph is going to be immensely utilized in the Metcalfe phase with the Akala integration. So for those of you who might not know, Akala is the biggest ecosystem in the Polkadot space, which is really the DeFi hub, and they just recently won the first parachain auction. So they will be the first parachain launching on Polkadot. If I'm not mistaken, on December 18th, they will slowly be rolling out features, and then in the Metcalfe phase, so next year, we will see the OriginTrail Akala integration. That's going to be very interesting, because there we will see several key new things happening. One of those things will be direct contact of the decentralized knowledge graph with Akala assets. So we will have the knowledge graph assets actually, as in the context I just explained a few minutes ago regarding the universal asset locators and keywords, also apply to Akala. So all of the assets that are growing there, but not only that, the Akala parachain will actually be integrated into the decentralized knowledge graph itself. So that means you will be able to use it as another chain that supports the graph. So today, what you can use is Ethereum, you can use XDAI blockchain, Polygon, and in the future there will be quite a few chains in the Polkadot Polkadot space that we see. But the first one will be Akala, and if all things go as planned, Akala and the Akala vote proves the Trace token as one of the fee tokens in the Akala space, which we are very positive and optimistic that will happen. That will also mean that you will be able to use Akala blockchain as the underlying blockchain in the OriginTrail decentralized knowledge graph with Trace token as the fee token. So no need to use, for example, Ethereum and Trace token as you need to use it today on Ethereum or pretty much any other chain. That's going to be very powerful. And on top of that, now if we look at from the perspective of network effects with the tooling available in the ecosystem of DeFi, things like stable coins, where we expect really the Akala AUSD token to be also integrated into the decentralized knowledge graph. So there's going to be many of these new things that are coming within the Metcalfe space, which just as we've had, for example, the 10x growth with expanding from Ethereum to multiple blockchains, now expanding into multiple realms like NFTs and DeFi, and not just those two, more to come as well. This will actually accelerate the network effects, and therefore the name of the phase where this all is happening obviously could not be any other name than the Metcalfe phase. So this is going to be very interesting. Now, the Metcalfe phase, we envision actually the OriginTrail to transition into what will be the version 7 of the decentralized knowledge graph with all of the learnings and improvements from version 6. One of the major improvements is actually going to be the introduction of staking and delegating tokens, Trace tokens within the decentralized knowledge graph. And that's going to happen on several levels. I'm just going to mention two. So one is actually delegation of tokens for the nodes in the decentralized knowledge graph. This delegation will mean that instead of having to run your own node like today to employ your Trace tokens within the network for the hosting of the knowledge graph, you will actually be able to delegate that those tokens you might have. If you don't have the technical knowledge to run a node, or you just don't want to do that, you will be able to delegate it to somebody else, and then part of that of the services that the nodes actually gets compensated for will actually be available to those who delegate those tokens, the Trace tokens. Not just that, but also another very interesting aspect of being able to employ the token will be actually staking on assets and keywords. Essentially meaning, and I can probably talk about this for 20 minutes just on this, but there will be a lot more revealed within the coming period, within the papers that we will be releasing. But in very short, what this means is that you will be able to actually stake tokens on a particular asset and keyword. So that means that, for example, if we take another Google analogy, today, if you do any Google search, the results you get are going to be the results that Google finds the most relevant for that particular search term. And the most relevant results come from two buckets. One is either the search makes the most sense. So for example, the search result that comes back on a website in the Google case, or on the asset in the decentralized knowledge graph phase, is really about how relevant it is. And Google uses all kinds of things, for example, counting how many links point to a certain website in this PageRank algorithm, which equivalently in the knowledge graph happens on the number of links between assets. vice versa, the relevance of the keywords and so on. But also what Google does is they enable you to pay for a certain keyword, right? So really paying to boost your position in the Google search result for your website. Well, very similarly in that regard, the decentralized version of that naturally will not involve payment to a certain party because there's no party controlling the system. It's a decentralized system. It's actually what the notion here to employ is really staking. So think of getting search results or really any type of query result, because search is just one subset of queries, and then having the results sorted according to a certain set of metrics, and one of those metrics actually being the amount of stake that is associated with some certain asset. For example, an NFT. There could be an NFT that has a certain amount of stake according to a certain value, and then this value actually gets associated with the query results of the decentralized knowledge graph. So that will be another way to employ the tokens. You will be able to go and put your tokens sort of to work on that, in that sense of actually, in a way, curating these results and actually getting the result of whatever that operation ends up being of the finding of that asset. For example, that asset could be on a knowledge marketplace, which is another set of really tools that is coming out in the Metcalfe phase. Let's say I'm selling some knowledge asset or some knowledge stream, and you have staked on my asset. Then some percentage of that earning from that marketplace transaction is actually going to be available to the actual stakers on that asset because they actually help promote that asset. It's a very fair, very interesting dynamic compared to, for example, a centralized service, especially where you have everything controlled by one party, and then also they can also manipulate the game in that sense. So that's also part of the Metcalfe phase, and I know I spread it out a little bit more. So how about I ask you, Tomasz, to expand a little bit about that and introduce what type of business models this will bring to the builders on top of the DKG.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's to your point of what you were already saying on kind of being able to offer different assets and associated data sets and offer them on a like a data marketplace type of an approach is what unlocks basically a new business model. Because currently, if you look at the decentralized knowledge graph, the business model is kind of one-sided in the sense that you are able to publish something, and then that is something that kind of exists within the DKG. But the interesting thing also happens once we have the kind of like data marketplace integrated in the DKG directly, is because you're able to then start to incentivize really more and more assets get discoverable in the decentralized knowledge graph. So that's like your like Airbnb sending you an email saying that you could be earning $200 off of your flat or of your house. Well, the same thing, but for your data. Either your personal data, for like organizational data, or any other types of setups. And that's really powerful because then you have like this driver that more and more assets are really getting onboarded. And here is really where then the network effects have another force that they can leverage, and more kind of assets get made discoverable, which is kind of like the whole, as we were speaking in the beginning about the different KPIs and the metrics. Like that's the number of assets definitely being there, and this is one key driver that can make it happen. Next to the whole connections between different assets existing, and as we see these the metaverse as well as the kind of the physical world coming together, having that type of one single fabric that is the common ground or the middleware that all of these different systems can look into, just shows so much value. And when you add this different business model on top of it, it's just a very powerful machine for producing those network effects and really starting to kind of grow like crazy. So that's on the topic of, I mean, the business model itself has been something that within the knowledge marketplace, we've been talking about it, and it's just a way of how really everything ties together, and how we're going to see this come to fruition. Yeah, I think that was on the point of on the business model. I don't know if you wanted to go into anything else, Bran, at the Metcalfe phase.
Yeah, so two things we briefly touched upon and also deserve a mention is, as we mentioned just now, knowledge marketplaces and generally knowledge tools. So there's going to be a set of tools called knowledge marketplaces, knowledge tokens, knowledge tenders, and knowledge wallets that are there to enable easier use of really the decentralized knowledge graph, and really creating assets and being able to transact, transfer them, and just value them from that perspective. So that really ties in, and really is the support for all the business models and the new staking and delegating features of the graph that are going to come about. And apart from that, there's also going to be a set of additional tools. Like I said, we're introducing optimizations in the Turing phase already, but we expect as the graph grows in the Metcalfe phase, more and more of such tools and optimizations, one of which will actually be related to a completely new concept which we've recently introduced called the graph contracts. And this is something that we intend to actually roll out on the OriginTrail parachain once it actually goes live, which is a concept of actually bringing a new set of smart contract, optimized smart contracts and smart contract tools to the blockchain ecosystem. And so the difference here being, and for those of you who might not know, the OriginTrail decentralized knowledge graph is not a blockchain. It's a network on top of blockchains, works with multiple blockchains. And then all of these blockchains connected to it can serve several purposes. One purpose is actually this verification or implementation of the protocol, but also the purpose would be to introduce graph data on chain. So that means either use it in some sort of market on chain or some Oracle type contracts. All of these really require some data processing to happen on chain. And because smart contracts on the existing blockchains are very general and very general purpose, I might say, very also limited, the graph contracts are actually something we want to introduce there to enable much easier and much more performant operations on this graph asset data. So it's one of the optimizations that we see happening in the space. So it's not the only one necessarily, but it's going to be actually enabling this trustless compute to be more performant and more efficient. And that is coming to the OriginTrail parachain with Polkadot. But generally also within the Turing and Metcalfe phase, there will be several services and like I said, SDKs that are going to be provided so that this off-chain compute is also covered and more efficient. So if you look at it from that perspective, we cover both the off-chain compute and then the ability to compute that either within the DKG network or just privately within your own services, or apart from that, compute in on-chain with general purpose smart contracts as today in the EVM is possible, or in the very near future actually do that on the OriginTrail parachain via graph contracts. These will be, like I said, graph optimized operations. If you've been involved in any sort of graph algorithmic work, think of graph searches, traversals, all kinds of graph operations being much easier to do and much more optimized in a smart contract. And then that way also enabling this set of verifiable on-chain compute to happen directly in a contract or in sync with, for example, the substrate off-chain palette that is already in the works, by the way, and something that's going to be very instrumental in the Akala integration that we mentioned also happening in the Metcalfe phase. So all of these, really, this bundle of things we talked about is all going to happen within the Metcalfe phase really to unleash this all of these network effects and having the ability to interact with all of these assets and with all of these tools within one single network, one single decentralized knowledge graph. So yeah, I think we covered the Metcalfe phase pretty much from the technical standpoint with that. And of course, we will be releasing more information on graph contracts as time goes. So if anybody is interested about that, definitely follow the news on that. But I think since we're approaching the end of the hour, we might want to touch upon the Berners-Lee phase and slowly bring it to the end of the deep dive. What do you guys think?
Yeah, sure. Let's go ahead.
All right. So as I mentioned, Berners-Lee or Tim Berners-Lee has coined not just the World Wide Web, but also something called the semantic web, or that was actually the originally dubbed Web 3. The idea is actually not that new. It's quite old, and the idea introduces semantics. Semantics meaning this meaning into the web, and up until a few years ago, until we actually got the stack of technologies, the trusted technologies, decentralized technologies that we have today, it is our opinion that the vision of Berners-Lee, Tim Berners-Lee, was not actually possible to happen because it was not just about semantics and having meaning. It was also about how can you trust that meaning that you actually obtain from a semantic web. So having that said, the Berners-Lee phase of the OriginTrail roadmap is really about the realization of this semantic Web3 based on the principles of machine readability or semantic web, but also the principles of really decentralization, trusted verification, and the ability to retain the privacy and the ownership of assets in this to be semantic web. And that means what OriginTrail really becomes a ubiquitous component of Web3. And in that sense, we have network effects already established, and they start exponentially growing on their own. It's from this moment on, it really becomes one of the biggest knowledge graphs in the world by both the number of assets in it, but also by the size, the sheer size of the graph. As we enter that phase, we can see because of these network effects kicking in very strongly, we will see the growth of the graph accelerate into further than any existing graph, knowledge graph that we see today. So it's going to be very exciting getting into this phase because it's just gonna be in that way building on its own self. It's going to have a ton of different tools and integrations built in, and obviously more things coming in. But there will be, we foresee over 1 billion assets being available in the decentralized knowledge graph at that point, and then quickly growing from 1 billion into multiple billions. Just for reference, today Google Knowledge Graph has about 5 billion assets entities. They don't have assets in that sense that we describe them. So we are reaching the scale and most likely surpassing the scale of Google at that point. And the total graph size is expected to go into hundreds of billions at that point. So it's going to be really a core service of both the metaverse, but also generally a global decentralized knowledge graph that will have assets indexed from not just metaverses but physical verses and universe, right? All of these interconnected with each other and really described and built upon in one single system. Yeah, it's going to be really excited. I'm very, very curious to see what all kinds of new integrations Berners-Lee brings us that are going to just come out of the community. And with OriginTrail at the time, and we, by the way, we don't speak about Berners-Lee phase as something happening in 2030. We expect this to happen within the next couple of years, already materializing within 2023, in early phases at least, for sure. So we're very excited to see what type of value this generates, especially in the context of Metcalfe's law. And if you know about Metcalfe's law says that the value of a network grows exponentially, meaning proportionally to the square of the number of participants or assets in a network. Once we reach billions of assets in the DKG, we will definitely see a huge value growth, and the exponential curve really going into a very, very interesting factor and direction. So yeah, I guess that's very briefly from my end on the Berners-Lee phase. Tomasz, Giga, you guys want to jump in and add something?
Yeah, I mean, it's, the Berners-Lee is really exciting future, and it starts today as well. So it's the first steps are have been in the works for the longest time, and it also like the next things in front are what are going to unlock just so much. I'm really excited to see kind of all of what we were talking about for Turing and then for Metcalfe to materialize, and yeah, just it's going to be fun. But I guess that on the hour concludes our overview or deep dive of the roadmap. Unless, Giga, you want to cap it off before we go to the questions?
Yeah, I'm more or less keeping myself mute because there's a terrible noise coming from the adjacent building. But why wouldn't we open the floor for the audience to ask us questions? We still have some time.
Right. The noise just showing we're really live.
Yeah, sure. Please pick it up where I left off.
The eternal drill, right?
All right. So let's give it a few seconds for people to raise their hands and be given the speaker's rights, and then maybe we can take a few questions.
And we have the first one here. Arno, welcome.
Hey guys, nice to listen to you again. I think I've already been I participated in 3 of your last AMAs. It was very pleasant all the time. I do have a question that kind of was on my mind for the last few weeks when I thought about your project. Are you also looking into SSI, self-sovereign identity? Because I know that the European governments, they are looking into it, and I thought on the knowledge graph you'd be able to have information about NFTs. One NFT, for instance, being a passport or an ID or a vaccination pass. Another NFT could be vaccination information, or maybe something like a batch number, including manufacturer information. Or if we were to think of the first NFT being a visa or a green card, then you could probably store information with regards to which governmental institution has issued it. So that would be probably a way to use OriginTrail for self-sovereign identity, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean it's especially for the European Union, that's the SSI topic is just so big, and just literally a few days ago we found out that OriginTrail is going to be a part of yet another project within what is called the Next Generation Internet, which is tackling how to create a better internet for the future with things like SSI as the core value of it. So kind of like this has to become a part of the infrastructure that is that the SSI is connecting to or working out of. So 100% we see that the alignment to be very high, and DKG can be leveraged for a lot of different assets that are connected to then identities that literally, either an individual or an organization can manage in a self-sovereign way. It's 100% a very, very aligned use case for the DKG. And like I said, it's been also proven, and there's going to be more for sure in that part coming in the next period.
Interesting. So I've actually reached out to you today, or to Giga on LinkedIn, because I have another few interesting use cases that I wanted to discuss, because I'm working in a consultancy firm, in a bigger one. And looking forward to talking to you guys maybe in January sometime, whenever you can make yourself available. And with regards to using OriginTrail for SSI, I think it would be a no-brainer, right? Because you could think of multiple or different governments creating different versions of their very own SSI, let's say, roadmap for the next few years, but you could really step in and bridge all of these gaps. That would be a fantastic project for you, probably.
Go ahead, bro.
Yeah, definitely. All of it sounds quite interesting, and just to put it out there, thanks for reminding me actually to mention SSI, because that's also part of the roadmap. Is we've been working with, as Tomasz said, Next Generation Internet Initiative, which is heavily built on the not just principles of SSI, but really SSI architecture. So if you look a little deeper into OriginTrail and the documentation, you will see quite a lot of SSI technologies already integrated. For example, things like decentralized identity or DIDs and verifiable credentials. So essentially, we've been working so that the whole decentralized knowledge graph is aligned with both the European SSI architecture, but also the general W3C standards. So that means you can observe the decentralized knowledge graph as kind of a binding network for different SSI solutions. One of them actually being we work together with our partners from Global ID, who are actually building an SSI. Well, you could consider it a credential wallet and a global identifier. But definitely, it is something that is part of the story of OriginTrail, because it is built into the architecture of the decentralized knowledge graph itself, and we're very closely following the developments, especially around the standards that are emerging in this space. Things coming particularly around verifiable credentials and decentralized identities that we're utilizing, and we don't want to reinvent, of course. So SSI is definitely going to be something that is very much in the realm of OriginTrail, and we will be, as Tomasz mentioned, revealing more both through the work with European projects, but also with our partners that you might have heard of before as well. Great question, by the way. Thanks so much, Arno.
Thanks, Brano.
All right. Do we have anybody else?
More hands. Put your hands up in the air.
Yeah, I was told that some people couldn't find a button and they wanted to ask questions in our previous Twitter spaces, and we might want to give them a little bit more time, some 30 seconds, just to see if anybody is still looking for the right button.
Should have the countdown music watch going. I don't know who can sing, but have that be a part of the whole thing. Yeah, for next time. Ideas.
Oh, here we go.
Mr. Gus has joined the speaker lounge. You still have to unmute yourself.
Cool.
Can you
Awesome.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir.
Hi, nice to talk to you guys. I had a quick question. I'm just curious about the upcoming advisors. If you guys have any comments regarding when we might hear more about their revealing of the advisors.
Yeah, it's a very exciting topic for us as well, and I don't want to say soon, but also we can't really commit to to a date, but it's not going to be too long before you hear about more kind of the rest of the crew that's rounding off the advisory board. But yeah, like on that topic, it's I'm very excited as well to see how, you know, all of them who are already on the board and the few that you still kind of haven't heard about, but will be joining, how they really play into, all of them really play into the entire roadmap that you've seen laid out, and will just amplify a lot of the stuff that is written there to be achieved in the best possible way and to have the best kind of impacts. But sorry to not give you a date. I think it'll happen. Yeah,
from our side, one of the blog post texts is already out, but needs to be confirmed within a corporate because it's a little bit bigger thing, and we were actually hoping we can
there you go.
announce one of them previous week, but hopefully this week is going to be enough for a lengthy corporate process to get this approved from the PR perspective. And then, of course, followed by the others. But we wanted to have certain pecking order, or at least certain logic to the announcement of the advisors. But expansion is not over, as you may have seen from the website. There are still a few shades there, a few silhouettes, which are most likely going to be complemented with another one. But yeah, stay tuned for more news.
And another guest.
Hi, thank you guys for taking the question. I know the topic of lambda adjustment has been a kind of a hot one among the node runners that are in the community. I wonder if you guys could comment on some of the automatic lambda adjustment features I believe were coming in V6.
That is a very good question. Thanks for that. The automatic adjustment has been already in development for quite some time. For those of you who do not understand what the question is about, just to give a bit of intro. So the lambda, or the price factor, is something that you as a node runner are able to set. And in that sense, setting up these factors is determining the overall price of the services on the network. So, and the adjustment of that is really based on the market for services on the network. So the automatic adjustment tool, which we have introduced in its initial versions, not on the mainnet, but just as a tool to estimate and measure if everything works all right, is actually based on a machine learning algorithm developed in-house with Tracelabs. And the idea is that we slowly roll it out with V6, though together with V6, we will see some difference in the way the protocol functions. So the actual V6 introduces a layering of protocols. So we will have different publishing and querying protocols. And with that, the modifications on the automatic adjustment plugin, or AAP as it's called, also coming with it. So definitely coming with V6 with slight alterations, but until then, it's going to be obviously more clear when we release the actual details of how this functions, and it will be very beneficial to actually start testing altogether as soon as the ability to run V6 nodes is given to all of us, so that we can actually make sure that the protocol is operating as it should, and that's going to be shown in the proper test when we actually not do it in a laboratory environment, but we all do it together in the test network, and then start introducing the automatic adjustment. Because first of all, in order to adjust something, you need to figure out that obviously everything performs well from the get-go. So short answer, yes, definitely automatic adjustment coming to V6, and then we're going to be rolling it out slowly, one at a time, once we roll out beta versions. And by the way, there will be multiple beta stages, so there won't be just one beta and then we go to mainnet. We'll have beta unroll one stage at a time, because we want to be testing elements independently for a certain time and introducing more and more things, and then finally obviously introducing the option to turn on automatic adjustment. This is, by the way, also important. It's not going to be imposed, as nothing is really in the decentralized knowledge graph. That would not make it permissionless. It's going to be permissionless, so that means you can turn it on or off if you want, but it will be available.
Thank you very much. That helps a lot.
You are welcome. Thank you for the question.
Can I just say, IOTB, you're much more than just a pretty profile picture. That's a very charming voice you're packing right there. Amos, what's up?
Yeah, how's everyone doing? I hope everyone's good. I have a couple. I'm coming in hot with a couple questions here.
All right.
So first of all, some updates, I guess, on OpenPKG, Swiss Federal Railways. Also, what's going on with my boy Phil Archer? How's he doing? Has GS1 been communicating with OriginTrail since our latest and greatest EPCIS 2.0 ventures? And I think that's about all I wanted to answer on for now, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
Whoa,
So
that's
that
a
was
lot of
a
questions.
bam. Right. I think it's, we're all kind of like everything falls within the within the roadmap. So everything, even OpenPKG and all the initiatives that we're building out the infrastructure of OriginTrail really fall in within the assets. So you'll be looking at everything that kind of is developed to be focused around an asset. So even an NFT right now can be looked at. There's a particular asset that's tied to a certain NFT, and then there's a certain knowledge graph that's associated with that particular kind of digital token, and that token can act as an access token, and it allows for a lot of stuff to be made within this architecture, including stuff like OpenPKG, which is just for the benefit of the listeners, is open personal knowledge graph. So how to really optimize the way you're handling your personal information. And tying back also to the question around an SSI, all of these things are really aligned. So as things get released, you'll be able to use it for multiple purposes, and kind of like that personal knowledge graph and personal data is for sure one thing that's very critical for a more fair, basically, internet future, but also for a potential to unlock that data is the new oil, not only for the enterprise or organizations, but also for the individuals. So it's very, very relevant topic that's very much aligned with the whole roadmap, and a lot of the network effects that are kicking in are driven also by individuals. So it's that's the thing that will fuel it and create kind of developments and further iterations on that.
So one more thing. There's some time ago, John mentioned a business and I think a business working group that we had no idea about. So we know that there's more working groups that you guys haven't told us. And earlier you guys said that we would be seeing and hearing more of those. So I guess that's outside of the assets question, since you said everything's tied up there. What's going on with these working groups? Are we going to see some of these members? We're very excited about that. So yeah.
The working groups theoretically, given the vast applicability of OriginTrail, could also be plentiful, and we try to keep the space open for any working group to form. That said, it's very difficult for us with so many very important things, coming in front of us, to be committing to just spend the resources of the core development team on any particular working group. But we do hear that there are a lot of things happening without our direct intervention, and we're excited to hear about those. We look forward to hear more about those initiatives. As said, we're one of the core developers, but definitely not the only participant in the ecosystem. A lot of exciting things are happening, again, without our direct involvement.
Oh, I had no idea you guys were that hands-off and things were functioning that hands-off. Okay, that's pretty exciting. All right, well, nice to hear.
You mentioned also EPCS, so not to leave you hanging on that, just to add upon that. So the standard is actually quite close. So there's the community review stage right now. And what that means for OriginTrail really is specifically when it comes to V6, is there's going to be a set of SDKs and really services built on top of the OriginTrail decentralized knowledge graph, such as, for example, the SDK for NFTs. There's also going to be an SDK that is going to be based on EPCS 2.0. So that is with the development of V6 that becomes part of the application layer. And that means really think of having the same knowledge graph underpinning different applications on top of it, but the glue between those actually being these new SDKs that will be rolling out. And it's a perfect timing because it synergizes at the same time. We get V6 coming out, and then we get EPCS 2.0 fresh out of the oven. So essentially having the ability to build on something that's final and not still in draft form, and then really updating all of the old EPCS 1.0 cases in time to 2.0. So there's quite a bit being done there, and there will be another set of SDKs just for that particular set of use cases that need EPCS. So yeah, excited to share more of that with you when it's out.
Awesome.
Good question, man. Thank you. All right, everybody. I think we're 80 minutes in. I'm a little worn out of talking so much, so I'll quit. But
I think we had the dive was deep, so I think we covered a lot of topics. So yeah, I think it was an exciting spaces. Again, forgot which one in the row it was, but the next time it's going to be the subsequent number to which one is now. So thanks for thanks for taking the time and joining us on this time around. And yeah, looking forward to putting all of this in motion and yeah, kind of unlocking all those sweet network effects. Thanks very much for joining in.
Thanks
everybody.
Stay safe.
You too. Cheers.
Drill away. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.